just down the gravel road from where I grew up, there's a little Clearwater Creek called Five Oaks. And everybody liked to go out and float down Five Oaks Creek. You could put in at the bridge, and then you could float about 2 miles down the creek, and you come out by the cemetery. Then you had to walk back across the cemetery to the road, and then hike the road all the way back to the bridge. Well, me and old Lem would take that $20 canoe of mine down there. We'd slide it in that creek and float. If it's fishing season, we'd go fishing. But when it's hunting season, we'd always take our shotguns. We'd float down that creek, and there's always a wood duck somewhere. Well, that boat of mine was kind of hard to drag, especially by myself, and so had a piece of rope tied on the front, but it'd dig into your shoulder and your chest if you was trying to pull it. So I found an old piece of fire hose. Cut that piece of fire hose and ran the rope through it, so when I threw it over my shoulder and under my other arm, it didn't dig in so bad. Well, that's not real important normally, but as this story unfolds, I think you'll come to see why I thought I'd mention it. Well, one morning, me and old Lem wanted to make sure we beat everybody else to them wood ducks, so we got down there a little earlier than normal, and it wasn't real easy to see that early. And I think at some point before I've told you that old Lem Parsons was a little bit, well, no, he's a lot afraid of snakes. He is especially afraid of an old cottonmouth snake. Some folks call it a water moccasin. Well, we got on that creek right at daylight. You could barely see anything. We started floating down the creek. We can hear wood ducks off in the distance, but we hadn't jumped any yet. Well, there's places there where the beavers had chewed on some trees. Them trees had fell over the creek, and we had to kind of hunker down to go underneath them. Well, on this one particular morning, there was one limb hanging down, and it touched Lem Parsons on the back of the neck. Well, one of Lem's biggest fears is we was going to go underneath a tree like that at some point, and one of them big old cottonmouth snakes was going to slide off of there into our boat. Well, that limb slid down the back of Lem's neck. He went to twisting and turning, and before I knew it, he stood up in the boat hollering, "It's a cottonmouth, Robert, it's a cottonmouth." Well, it's a little too dark to see exactly what was going on, and old Lem turned around, looked down in the bottom of the boat, and there lay that piece of fire hose. Well, it was wet, so it looked kind of dark. And in Lem's credit, I reckon maybe it kind of looked like a snake laying there. Well, old Lem went to doing a St. Vitus Day dance, trying to stomp that snake to death. I said, "Lem, you're going to kill us. Cut it out." It was too late. Old Lem was stomping on the bottom of that boat. He stomped so hard, he stomped right through one of the ribs of the boat and knocked all the rivets loose. Water started gushing in the boat, and I still couldn't convince Lem that that wasn't a snake. So Lem decided to bail out. He dove over the side of that boat right into that creek. Well, about the only thing that saved me from going under the water was that when Lem jumped out, that shifted all the weight to the back of the boat where I was sitting. The front end of the boat come up out of the water about 18 inches. That was just high enough to keep that crack in the boat above the water line. Well, I did my best to get to the bank, drug myself out on the bank, pulled the boat out, and I threw Lem a rope because the banks on that creek were straight up and down. There was no climbing up them. I said, "Lem, son, you're going to have to learn to control your emotions a little bit. I don't think you'll ever be killed by a cottonmouth snake. But if you pull that again, I'll kill you myself.